So now we want to be able to look at a graph and being able to evaluate functions using a graph, also find composition of functions, and so on and so forth. So here we've got these two graphs on the right. This is on page 51. And so the dashed line is my f function, the solid line is my g of function. And so part A says find f minus g of 3. So remember what this notation means. This means f of 3 subtract g of 3. So when I see f of 3, I'm looking at a graph. When the x value is 3, I want to know what the y value is on f. So I'm looking at 3. I'm looking at this point. Oops, sorry, wrong color. My bad. I'm looking at this point here. This is the point 3, comma 4. So the y value is 4. So I'm going to put that there. And now I'm looking at g of 3. So that's 3, comma 3. So the y value is 3. So this is going to be 4 minus 3. And that's just a fancy way of saying 1. Let's take a look at b. So we're going to have g of negative 2 divided by f of negative 2. So now I'm going over here and I'm looking at f of negative 2. Well, that point is negative 2, comma 2. And now I'm looking at g of negative 2. That's down here. It's negative 2, comma negative 4. So g of negative 2 is going to be negative 4, so let's put that in. F of negative 2 is positive 2, reading off the y-coordinate. And then I'm doing negative 4 divided by positive 2. Well, that's just negative 2. All right, C now is composition. So this is g of f of 0. So I have to first evaluate f of 0. So I go to my graph. F of 0 is this point here. That's the point 0, comma 2. So the y value is 2. So that becomes 2. So now I'm looking at g of 2. So I'm going over to x equals 2. Looking at g, my y value here is up at 4. So that's going to be equal to 4. Let's try this next one. So f here is the outside function this time. G is my inside function. So I'm looking at g of negative 3. So I go back to my graph. Negative 3, g is the solid one, so the y value here is negative 4. Now I'm looking for f of negative 4, so I go to my graph. Looking at negative 4. Looking at my f graph, the y value is negative 2. So this will be equal to negative 2. All right, this last one's a little bit weird. So let's take it step by step. So this is f of negative 3. So it's like I'm applying the function twice. It's kind of weird. All right, well, let's just look at figuring out what the purple is. F of negative 3. Well, my y value is going to be 0 here if I look it back up in my graph. So this is y value here is going to be 0 at x equals -3 on f. So that's just 0. And now I need to find f of 0. Well, f of 0 here is going to be 2. So my answer here would be 2. So our final answer would be 2 for this one. All right, let's turn the page. And here's another one. So we got the kind of same situation. This time g is the dashed one, f is the solid one. So just kind of mixing it up here. So looking at f of 4, I'm looking at the solid line. When x equals 4, my y value is 2. Then I'm looking at g of 0, so now I'm looking at the dashed line. When x equals 0, y value is 4. Let's look at c. Okay, g is the outside function. F is the inside function. Well, we already found what f of 4 was. That was 2. Hey, we'll take any kind of free gift we can get. So now we just need to find g of 2. So again, I'm looking at the dashed line. When g is 2, the y value is also 2. So that would be equal to 2. Now remember here, this is not composition, this is multiplication. This means f of -2 times g of -2. And let me do the f in red. My bad. So, looking at f of -2, I'm going to my graph. F of -2 here is -2. G of -2 is 3. And remember here I'm multiplying, so I got to take a -2 times a 3, and that's going to give me a -6. All right, let's go ahead and look at some more examples. So let's look at number 2 here. We want to evaluate the function for the given value of x. So here we're trying to find, this is multiplication again, not composition. So you got to remember that, remember the difference. This needs to be an open circle to be composition. So this is going to be f of 2 times g of 2. So f of 2, what's 4 times 2? And that's going to be equal to 8. G of 2, this would be 2 minus 6. And remember, this is in absolute values. 2 minus 6 is -4, but remember, I'm taking the absolute value of -4, so that becomes a positive 4. And then we're multiplying these two answers together. That gives us 32. Let's try this next one. Here we're subtracting. So this would be f of 1 subtract g of 1. So f of 1, well, it's -2 times 1, which is just -2. G of 1 is 1 over 1 minus 4. So that'd be a minus 1 over negative 3. Well, that negative 2, we can rewrite that as a negative 6 over 3. Just writing that over 1 again, common denominator. Minus the negative becomes plus 1/3, and that will give us a negative 5/3. You can also do that directly on your TI-30XS calculator. So if I go negative 2, subtract, fraction key, 1 over negative 3, it will give me the answer. So you don't need to panic about that. Let's try number 4. And here we're dividing. So this is going to be equal to f of negative 14 divided by g of negative 14. And I think I'm going to go off to the side here and just figure out each one individually. So let's do f of negative 14. And, I definitely want a calculator for this one. This is not for the faint of heart. Alright, so let's go and pop our calculator here. So that's 42. Okay. Hopefully g is a little bit better. So g of negative 14, that's the absolute value of negative 14 plus 9. Well, that's a lot better. Absolute value of negative 5, which would be 5. All right, I certainly like g much better. Hopefully you like g better than f here as well. So now I'm going to go ahead and write this as 42 over 5. If Alex asks you to leave it as a fraction that's reduced to the lowest term, that's done. If not, if you need to write a decimal, just go ahead and divide. So that would be 8.4 if we did it as a decimal. So again, just checking Alex to see which answer they want. Let's turn the page. And we're getting lots of practice on these. Now, careful, careful, careful. This is composition. So again, notice the difference. Multiplication, composition. So you got to pay attention to it. This is a different game we're playing. This is now we're finding f of g of negative 2. So I'm going to first find, on my scratch paper, I'm going to find g of negative 2. So I'm just going to plug in here. 3 times the negative 2 is negative 6. Negative 6 minus 4 is negative 10. So that would just be equal to negative 10. So now I'm working on evaluating f of negative 10. So now we're going to plug in. Now here, when I square negative 10, that becomes 100. 2 times the negative 10 is negative 20, so I'm going to get 100 minus 20, which is going to give me 80. So that would be our answer.